table. Something Tina, maybe.
So Rava says, "V'chilav kal v'chomer hu." Amalei. So Rava says, "Saratochia." I have a pirchan that's kal v'chomer because the b'makom mitzvah sira, right? When there's a mitzvah of yibum, then there's an isur tzara, but shalom makom mitzvah sharia. So maybe we should apply that same structure to the case of an erva herself. That b'makom mitzvah, the erva is chal, but shalom makom mitzvah, there's no erva. Amalei. So Rava laughs at this question. He says, Alecha Amar Kra, the pasuk says, B'chayeh, kol sheb'chayeh.
You got it? That's good.
Mitzvah Hashem.
Okay.
So
if you could figure out which cable there doesn't work.
The pasuk says that with regard to Achos Isha, it says, Legalos arvasa aleha b'chayeha. The Torah added the word b'chayeha to teach me that as long as his wife is alive, he cannot marry his wife's sister. And that applies bein b'makom mitzvah or bein shalom b'makom mitzvah. There's no difference. So the Gemara says, but hai b'chaya mi boile lemu'ute liachar misa. The word b'chaya is telling you that after the death of his wife, he's allowed to marry her sister. And it doesn't tell you anything about whether or not the Isur of Achos Ishto always applies as long as she's alive. The Torah is only coming to tell you that after the death of your wife, there's no Isur of Achos Isha, but it doesn't mean that during the lifetime of your wife, your Achos Isha is always Asura. Maybe it's only Asura, but Makom Yibu. So Gemara answers, Hahi, the fact that you're allowed to marry your wife's sister after the death of your wife, that's derived from a different pasuk. The Isha el Achosa lo tikach. Nafka. From there we derive, right? It's only when he's marrying his sister while he's married to his wife. But the Gemara says, if you can deriving the conclusion that you're allowed to marry your wife's sister after your wife's death from the pasuk v'isha lachosa, hava mina, I would have come to the conclusion that nisgarsha sharia. Right, it's only also when you're marrying two sisters. But let's say you divorce your wife, you can marry her sister. As long as his wife is alive, he's not allowed to marry his wife's sister. Afal gav dinis garsha lo, he's not allowed to marry his wife's sister. So in other words, the b'chayeh is not superfluous for any other drasha. So once again, now we have to ask the question: how do we know that there's an Isur Erva Shalom B'makom Mitzvah Amar Ravuna Bar Tachlifa Mishmei Derava Trei Kroi Ksiva? There are two psukim with regard to the Isur of Achos Isha. Ksiv, it says Isha El Achosa Lo Sikach Litzrar, and from the word Litzrar, we would derive the conclusion that both she and her tzara are prohibited. Uksiv, in the next part of the pasuk, it says legalos erva sa, and now we shift to a lashon yachid, techado mashma, only one of them. Ha ketzad. How do we reconcile these two verses that seem to contradict each other? The first verse indicates that both of them are suras, she, the erva, and hatzar. Second one says chado mashma, only one. B'makom mitzvah. Shtein asuros. Shalom b'makom mitzvah hi asura v'tzarasa muteres. In the case of Yibum, both the erva and the tzara are prohibited. In the case of Shalom b'makom mitzvah, she is asur because she's an erva, but her tzara is muteres. So Gemara asks, Epakana, maybe I should turn it around the other direction. And the Gemara answers him, Cain, lo yomar oleha. The word litzrar, which means that it's a lobamakam mitzvah, then he didn't have to say aloud all. And he has an explanation here, which we'll try to read very quickly. He says, "Ein lo mashenichtav kidei lelamed al legalos ervasa shudafka b'mokom mitzvah," that the Isser Erev only applies when there's Yibum. Sharei Adover Muva Miela. Me'achar Shulfaneni Shnei Ksuma Avachishin says, Litzar Oser Afis Hatzara, Valegalos Ervasa, Eno Oser Elasa Erva Bilvat, Umatir Sarasa. Is therefore it's more logical to assume that the Oser is Shalo B'Makom Mitzvah, and then the Erva is Asura only in the singular, only she. But if it's B'Makom Mitzvah, then both are Asuras. Omalei Rav Ashi Rav Kahana B'mai Dahai Olel Lisura. How do you know that the word Olel is coming to teach you Isur? Namely, that Torah Sachos Ishto is Asur B'Makom Yibum. Dilma, perhaps the word Olel is Letera. It's coming to teach us regarding the Erva Atzma, that b'makom mitzvah she's muteres. Maybe it's a mute. If it's a shalom b'makom mitzvah situation, then there's an isur both the erva and hatzara. And that's called shalom b'makom olel. Avo b'makom olel, when there's a mitzvah of yibum, shtei and mutaros, the mitzvah of yibum is going to trump both the erva and hatzara. So if Khan answers him, Cain, if that would be the case, then legalos erva dechada hechi michkachasla. In what scenario would the legalos erva in the singular apply to only one of them? Iba makom mitzvah, you're telling me that makom mitzvah shtei and mutaros. The shalom makom mitzvah shtei and asuros. So where do you have a singular, a one single woman who's singled out from the pasuk legalos ervasa, and therefore we must assume that olel is coming to teach me the isur tzara that's derived from litzrar, but only b'makom mitzvah. But shalom b'makom mitzvah, the tzara is muteres, the erva herself is asura, and that's legalos ervasa in the singular. Gufa. Let's go back to the Brisa. Rebbe Omer. Rebbe says, "V'lakach ulakacha v'ibem v'ibma lesar tzaros v'arayos." The extra hay in these two psukim are coming to prohibit the tzara and the arayos. The Gemara asks, "Midi tzaros ksive hacha?" There's no mention of the word tzaros over here in this pasuk. Right? The word tzara came from litzar in the parsha of Achos Ishta. And furthermore, tzaros mi litzar nafka. The Brisa derives the exclusion of a tzara and the isur of a tzara from a pasuk in Parshas Achos Isha Litzar. So Gemara answers, let's start with the second kasha. Litzar mapikle Rebbe likid Rabbi Shimon. Rebbe needs the pasuk Litzar to derive the conclusion of Reb Shimon. In a case where Reuven and Shimon are two brothers that marry Rachel and Leah, two sisters, and there's a third brother named Levi. And Reuven and Shimon die, and Rachel and Leah, the two sisters, fall for Yibum in front of Levi. And Rabbi Shimon, the Tana Rabbi Shimon, says that neither Rachel nor Leah need neither Chalitza nor Yibum, and he derives it from the pasuk Isha el achosolo sikach litzar, that when they become tzaros zulazu, because they are both falling for Yibum, and there's a zika to both of them, to one person, namely to Levi. Lo yil l'choli kucha b'af achas mim. In such a case where two of them fall for Yibum, and they're both tzaros zulazu, and there's a zika of both of them to one person, then there's no lekuchin li'af echad mim. Neither of them will have Yibum. So that's what Rebbe does with that pasuk of Litzar. So Rebbe agrees to and accepts Rebbe Shimon's drasha, and therefore in a case where two sisters become tzaros, and they both fall for even to the third brother. So in that case, both of them are pturas from Yibum and Chalitza. So the pasuk of Litzar is not free for a drasha to derive the Isur Tzara, because Rebbe needs it for this din of Rabbi Shimon, of two sisters that fell simultaneously in front of Levi. So therefore, Rebbe is going to use the pasuk of Lokach v'lokcha to derive the Isur Tzara. So now we go back to the first kasha, but Tzara hacha ksiv, where does it say Tzara in this pasuk? There's no mention of the word Tzara, hachikama. This is what Rebbe says. Im kain, if you would assume that Tzara Sever is mutaris b'yibum, lema kra, the pasuk who said v'lokach, my ulekacha. So the word lekacha implies that we're talking about a man who died with two wives, leaving two wives, and the Torah commands us that the Yavam should marry one of the two wives. And the pasuk is telling us, Kol hecha deika treli kuchen, if he has the possibility of marrying either one of these two wives, the boy nosif hai, he's got a choice of two Yevamos, Sharia, then they're both mutar sliba. But elo, if he cannot be mekayim the velokcha with regard to one of the two of them, because she's an erva, is travayu asirin. Both of them are asuros, whether it's the erva herself or the tzara. Now the Gemara explains Rebbe. Since the Torah prohibited in a drasha, tzaras erva, b'makom mitzvahs yibum, we could have raise the possible logic that there would be an isur even shelo b'makom mitzvah, and therefore the Torah says v'yibma with an extra hey as a miyut b'makom yibum hu dasiri tzara shelo makom yibum shariat tzara rabbanan hayu l'kachamai avdile. What drasha they're going to learn from the extra hey of drasha the ptur tzara they already derive from litzar. And the Gemara answers me boile Reb Yossi bar Chanina. Dom Reb Yossi bar Chanina ulekacha melamed shemigarsha beget umachzira. Even after he marries his Yevama and he's mekayim the mitzvah of Yibum, he can give her a get and machzira, and he could remarry her after the get. We don't say that she goes back to be the heir of the original heir of Eshes Ach. And then the Gemara says, V'yidma, what is the pasuk V'yidma teaches us according to Rabbanon, al karcha, that he could be meyabim her even against her will. So this is where we're going to stop for today. We're up to the Rebbe. And that's where Mitzvah Shem will pick it up. We'll pick it up tomorrow. Okay, then. Thank you very much. And again, I apologize for the problem with the internet. We'll do better tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem.